Never thought I'd be the guy who installs cameras pointed at his own kitchen. I also never thought I'd be the guy whose pool maintenance company ended up running a tax fraud scheme out of his garage. Both of those things turned out to be true, and I'm still trying to figure out which one bothers me more. My name's Curtis. I'm 53 years old, divorced about 8 years now, and I work as a regional sales director for a commercial HVAC distributor based out of Tampa. The job has me on the road 4 days a week, sometimes 5, covering accounts from Jacksonville down to the Keys. I've put close to 200,000 miles on my Tahoe in the last 4 years. My ex-wife used to say I treated I-95 like a second marriage. She wasn't wrong about that either. After the divorce, I bought a place in a development called Sandpiper Reach up in North Pinellas County. 3 bedrooms, screened-in lanai, small pool out back, nothing fancy. The HOA dues are reasonable. The neighbors keep to themselves, and I can leave a porch light on a timer and not think about the house for 4 days at a stretch. That was the deal I made with myself when I signed the mortgage. Buy something I can lock up and forget about. Live small. Travel for work. Save up. Maybe retire early to North Carolina where my brother is. That was the plan anyway, until this past March when I got a phone call from a woman named Delphine that turned my whole year inside out. Delphine is the HOA board treasurer at Sandpiper Reach. I'd met her exactly twice, both times at the mailboxes. She's somewhere in her 60s, retired from teaching. The kind of woman who notices everything and writes most of it down. I was sitting in a parking lot outside a Cracker Barrel in Ocala, eating a chicken sandwich between accounts, when my phone rang and I saw her name come up. I almost didn't answer it. I figured it was about the palm trimming assessment or somebody complaining about my trash cans being out a day late. "Curtis, honey, I'm sorry to bother you. Is this a bad time?" I told her it wasn't. She had a way of starting conversations that made you brace yourself. Well, I'm gonna come straight to it. We had our quarterly meeting with the utility cooperative yesterday and your account flagged on their irregular usage report. Your water consumption for January and February is more than 4 times what it was the same months last year. They wanted us to confirm there wasn't a leak. I sat there with my sandwich half wrapped on the dashboard. 4 times. I'm one guy. Half the month I'm not even there. My water bill in January should look like a vacation home's. "That's not possible," I told her. "I'm hardly home." That's what I told them. But Curtis, there's something else, and I've been chewing on whether to say it. You know my next-door neighbor, Ramona? She mentioned to me a few weeks back that she's been seeing a white pickup truck in your driveway pretty regularly. Said she thought maybe you'd hired somebody to do work on the house. She figured you'd given them a key or code or something. My mouth went dry. I hadn't hired anybody. I had the pool guys, but they came out front of the house on Tuesdays and they had a gate code for the side yard, not the house. How regular is regularly? She said 2, 3 times a week, sometimes for a couple hours, sometimes longer. I told Delphine I'd handle it. I hung up and just sat there. My sandwich was cold. I had 2 more accounts to hit before 5 and I couldn't have told you the names of either company on a bet. My head was full of static. You ever have a moment where you realize the picture you've been carrying around in your head about your own life might not match reality? That was that moment for me. I'd been telling myself for 4 years that my house was sitting quiet and empty when I wasn't there. The mail piling up, the pool pump running on its schedule, the thermostat holding at 78, a whole imagined emptiness I'd built up like a snow globe. Somebody had been opening that snow globe. I made it through the rest of the day on autopilot. I was supposed to drive back to my hotel in Gainesville that night and finish the route the next day. Instead, I called my regional manager, told him I had a family situation, and pointed the Tahoe south. I made Tampa by 10:30. I didn't go to the house. That was the first thing I decided. Whoever this was, they had a pattern, and if I came roaring up the driveway at 11 at night, the pattern would change. I needed to see the pattern. So I drove past Sandpiper Reach without slowing down, took the second exit, and got myself a room at a Hampton Inn off Tampa Road, 2 Queens, view of the parking lot. I sat on the edge of the bed with my work boots still on, and I just kept turning the phone over in my hands, trying to figure out what I was actually going to do about this. The first thing I did, around midnight, was call the non-emergency line for the sheriff's office. The deputy who picked up was patient with me. I told him the whole thing: HOA call, water usage, neighbor sightings, white pickup. He took it down. Then he told me something I wasn't expecting. "Sir, here's the issue. Until we can show forced entry or you can document who exactly is on the property and what they're doing, this is a real gray zone for us. We see this with adult kids, ex-spouses, contractors who overstep. If a deputy rolls up to your house and finds somebody inside who claims they have permission to be there, even verbal permission from somebody who isn't you, we end up in a he said, she said. The strongest move you can make is documentation. Photo, video, dates, times. Then when we move with a case in hand. I told him I understood. He told me to call back when I had something concrete. He said it kindly, but I could hear the version of this conversation he'd had 100 times before in his voice. I barely slept. I lay there staring at the popcorn ceiling, listening to the ice machine cycle on and off down the hallway. I kept running through the same loop. Who had a key to my house? My brother, who lived in Asheville. The pool company, who had a gate code but not a key. The HVAC tech who'd put in my new system 2 years ago, who I'd let in and watched the whole time. That was it. That was the whole list. The next morning, I drove to a Best Buy on Dale Mabry and bought 4 Wi-Fi cameras. 2 indoor, 2 outdoor. A doorbell camera. A little tablet to monitor the feeds. The kid who rang me up tried to upsell me on a subscription service, and I just said yes to whatever he wanted because I was barely listening. I drove to my house around 11 that morning, when I figured a normal weekday visitor would be at work somewhere if they had a real job. I parked at the corner and walked the last 100 yards. I let myself in through the front door with my own key, and I stood in my own foyer for a good 30 seconds before I could move. I want to try to describe what that felt like, because if you haven't had this happen to you, it's hard to understand. The house smelled wrong. Not bad, not even really different to most people probably. But I'd lived there alone for almost 4 years. I knew what my house smelled like. It smelled like my laundry detergent and the coffee I make and the candle my daughter gave me last Christmas that I light maybe twice a year. That morning it smelled like somebody else's deodorant. Like an aftershave I don't wear. Faint, but there. I walked through every room like I was clearing a building. Living room first. The remote for the TV was on the wrong arm of the couch. I'm a creature of habit. I always put it on the left arm because I sit on the right side. It was on the right arm, kitchen. There was a coffee filter in the trash can, used, ground, still in it. I drink coffee from Keurig pods. I don't even own a regular coffee filter. I went to the cabinet above the fridge where I keep the random stuff, and there was a brand new bag of coffee grounds in there. Folgers. I don't buy Folgers. Office. My desk had been used. I could tell because the little dish where I keep paper clips and a pen had been moved about 6 inches. The chair was rolled back from the desk in a way I never leave it. I always tuck the chair in when I get up. Master bedroom. The bed was made, but it wasn't made the way I make it. I do hospital corners. My dad was Army. It's a thing. This was a normal flat tuck. Somebody had slept in my bed and remade it badly. Guest bathroom. There was a hair in the sink that wasn't mine. Brown. I'm gray going on white. The garage was the worst one though. The garage was the worst one because of what I found and because of what it meant. My garage has a workbench along one wall, a couple of plastic shelving units, and otherwise, it's mostly just where I park the Tahoe when I'm home and a few totes of seasonal stuff. There was now a third shelving unit, a new one, with brown cardboard boxes on it. I didn't touch them. I went outside to the lanai and stood there looking at my pool for a long time trying to talk myself down. Then I went back in and I installed the cameras. I put one in the living room behind a row of books on the shelf, angled to catch the front door and the kitchen entry. I put one in the kitchen up on top of the cabinets where you wouldn't see it unless you climbed up. I put one in the hallway pointing at the bedroom doors. I put one in the garage tucked behind a paint can on the workbench, pointing at the new shelves. I hung the doorbell cam where the old one used to be. I left everything else exactly the way I'd found it. I didn't touch the boxes. I didn't move the remote. I didn't make the bed right. I locked up. I drove back to the Hampton Inn. I set up the app on the tablet and I waited. It took less than 4 hours. The doorbell pinged at 3:47 in the afternoon. I opened the app and watched a white Ford F-150 pull into my driveway. 2 men got out. One was somewhere in his 40s, heavyset, wearing a Tampa Bay Rays cap and a polo shirt with a logo I couldn't quite read. The other was younger, maybe late 20s, skinny, in a t-shirt and cargo shorts. The older one walked up to my front door, punched a code into my keypad lock like he'd done it 100 times before, and the two of them went inside. I want to tell you that I felt rage in that moment. I didn't. I felt cold, like somebody had opened a window in the back of my skull. I sat on the edge of that hotel bed and I watched two strangers walk through my living room into my kitchen and stand at my own kitchen island, talking like they own the place. The audio on those cameras is not great, but it's enough. The older one said something about the shipment. The younger one said something I couldn't make out. Then they went out through my backslider toward the garage. I switched cameras and watched them open one of the cardboard boxes on the new shelving unit. They pulled out what looked like stacks of envelopes, bundles of them. The older one started sorting them into smaller piles on my workbench. The younger one pulled out a laptop and set it on a fold-up tray table they'd apparently brought with them and started typing. I watched them work in my garage for almost 2 hours. They left a little before 6. The older one punched a code into the keypad on the way out to lock up. The pickup backed out of my driveway and was gone. I called the deputy from the night before back. He wasn't on shift, but the dispatcher routed me to a Detective Lassiter who told me to come in the next morning and bring everything I had. That night, I did some homework. I sat in that hotel room with 2 laptops open and I ran the plate from the F-150 through every public database I could find. I couldn't pull the registration myself, obviously, but I could screenshot the truck and zoom in on the polo shirt logo. It took me about an hour of squinting and Googling. The logo said Sunshine Aquatics, which was my pool service. The pool service I'd been paying $165 a month for the last 3 years. I sat there and I felt something settle into me that I haven't quite been able to shake since. The pool guys, the ones who came every Tuesday and brushed my pool and checked the chlorine, they had a gate code for the side yard, not the house. They had no business being inside my home, let alone in my garage with a laptop and a box of envelopes. But it was worse than that, because I'd hired Sunshine Aquatics back in the spring of the year after the divorce, and the owner, a guy who'd introduced himself as Mick, had been the one to come out and quote me. Mick had given me his card. Mick had asked if I was around a lot or if I traveled. I told him the truth, that I was on the road most of the week. Mick had nodded and said that was fine. His guys would never need to bother me. They'd just come and go on Tuesdays. He'd asked about the gate code. He'd told me it'd be useful if his crew had a spare key to the house in case they needed to shut off the main water valve in an emergency. He'd been so casual about it. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found a guy who thought ahead like that. I'd given Mick a spare key. 3 years ago, I had completely forgotten about it. He probably knew I'd forgotten. He'd been counting on me forgetting. I went to the sheriff's office the next morning. Detective Lassiter was maybe 40, short hair, wedding ring, the kind of guy who looked like he ran half marathons on the weekend. He sat with me for almost 3 hours. He watched my footage. He took screenshots. He had me write down everything I could remember about Mick, about the original hire, about who'd come to the property over the years. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face. "Curtis, you understand this is more than just a guy crashing in your house, right?" "I'm starting to. Those envelopes, the laptop, the way they were sorting things, that's not somebody hanging out. That's an operation. We're going to need to be careful about how we move on this." He explained the plan. They didn't want to just kick the door in. They wanted to surveil for a week or two and see who else came in and out. They wanted to know if there were other properties. They wanted to know what was in those envelopes. He asked me if I could stay out of the house for another 2 weeks. He asked me if I could go back on the road and pretend like nothing was wrong. I told him I could. The next 2 weeks were the longest 2 weeks of my adult life. I worked my route. I took my meetings. I ate my hotel breakfasts and drove my miles. And at night, I sat in my room and watched the feed from my own garage like it was a reality show I'd been forced to subscribe to. Here's what I learned in those 2 weeks. The older guy, Mick, came to my house 7 times. The younger guy, who I later learned was named Tyler and was Mick's nephew, came 11 times. A woman showed up twice. 40s, blonde, business clothes, a laptop bag over her shoulder. She'd sit at my kitchen island with Mick and they'd go through paperwork for an hour or two. She drove a white BMW that I got plates on. The audio caught a lot. Some of it I couldn't make out, but some of it I could, and the parts I could made me want to set the house on fire and walk away. They were running a fake business out of my garage. Multiple fake businesses, actually. The envelopes were mail. The laptop was for managing a network of LLCs they'd set up under names from obituaries using a mail forwarding service that routed everything to my house. They were using my home address as the registered business address for at least 6 shell companies that were filing fraudulent state tax refunds and unemployment claims out of multiple states. My utility bills, my homeowner's documents, the fact that the property was owned outright in my name and had a clean paper trail for years, all of it was the cover. A real house, a real address, a real homeowner who was never there to ask questions. The woman, who I later learned was named Patrice, was the accountant. She handled the filings. Mick was the one who'd identified me through Sunshine Aquatics as a viable host. Tyler was the runner. The mail came to my mailbox. They'd come pick it up, sort it, scan what they needed, store what they didn't. The kicker, the part that I still can't quite get over, is what I heard them say on day 11. Mick was sitting at my kitchen island with Patrice. They were going through what sounded like a quarterly review, and Mick said, plain as day, "Curtis is the cleanest one we've got. The trucker's been a headache. Curtis, we could ride for years." The trucker. There was another one. There were other guys like me. I told Detective Lassiter that night. He told me they'd already started identifying other clients of Sunshine Aquatics who fit the profile. Single owners, frequently away, no kids or roommates. They were up to 4 other properties at that point. By the end of the next week, they had 6. They moved on a Thursday. The plan was to wait until Mick, Tyler, and Patrice were all in my house at the same time. That happened around 4 in the afternoon on a Thursday in early April. Detective Lassiter called me from my driveway. I'd flown back into Tampa that morning and was waiting in an unmarked car 2 streets over with a victim advocate from the sheriff's office. I watched on my phone as deputies came up my front walk. I watched the doorbell cam catch Mick's face when he opened the door and saw the badges. I will keep that footage until the day I die. They arrested all 3 on the spot. They seized 2 laptops, 4 boxes of mail, a printer with check stock loaded in it, and a binder full of LLC filings going back almost 2 years. They estimated the operation had cleared somewhere north of $400,000 in fraudulent refunds and unemployment payments across 6 states. The charges came down hard. Mick took the worst of it. Federal mail fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, conspiracy. He took a plea around the end of the summer for 7 years federal. Patrice got 4. Tyler, who cooperated fully and was apparently in well over his head, got 2 years in probation. There's a restitution order in place. I'll see a little of it. Most of the victims of the actual fraud, the people whose identities were used to file those returns, will see more of it than me. Which is how it should be. I haven't quite recovered from the part where Mick, sitting in a courtroom in his county jail jumpsuit, looked at me when the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim statement, and I saw absolutely nothing in his face. No regret, nothing. He'd shaken my hand on my front walk 3 years ago and told me his guys would take good care of my pool. He'd been planning the rest of it the whole time. He'd watched me, he'd cased me. He'd waited until I forgot about that spare key, and then he'd moved in. I was a resource to him. I was a clean address with a quiet owner and a predictable schedule. I sold the house at the end of June. I just couldn't do it anymore. Every time I walked into my kitchen, I saw Mick standing at my island sorting other people's mail. Every time I went into my garage, I saw Tyler with his laptop on that fold-up table. I tried for about 6 weeks to make peace with it. I deep cleaned every room. I had a locksmith come and rekey every door. I had the keypad replaced and the codes wiped. I went out and bought new bedding, new towels, a new coffee maker even though I'd never used the old one. None of it worked. The house was poisoned for me. I moved into a condo about 10 miles south. 2nd floor, gated community, key fob entry, security in the lobby. My monthly nut is higher than it used to be, and the place is smaller, and I don't have a pool anymore. I don't care. I sleep better here than I have in years. I have a Ring doorbell, 2 indoor cameras, a smart lock that texts me every time it's used, and a relationship with my neighbor across the hall who has my number and instructions to call me if she ever sees anything weird around my door. My daughter, who's 26 and lives in Atlanta, came down for a weekend in August. She walked through the condo and asked me, gently, if I was okay. I told her I was. I'm not sure I was telling her the truth. I think I'm getting there. I think the version of me that bought that house in Sandpiper Reach, that handed Mick a spare key without thinking twice, that trusted that the world would leave my empty rooms alone, I think that version of me is gone. I don't know if I miss him or not. He was naive in a way I can't afford to be anymore. I want to say a few things to anybody out there who's listening to this and who has a life that looks anything like mine looked. Anybody who travels for work. Anybody who lives alone. Anybody who owns a house that sits empty more than it's lived in. First, make a list today of every single person who has access to your home, every spare key you've ever handed out, every code anybody else knows, every contractor, cleaning service, lawn guy, pool guy, alarm tech who has ever been inside. Write the list down, then go through it and ask yourself if you actually still need every one of those people to have access. The answer is almost always no. Second, replace every key-based lock in your house with a smart lock that gives you a separate code for every person who needs entry and gives you a log of every time the door is opened. The technology costs a couple $100. It would have caught my situation in the first week. Third, look at your utility bills. Not just the dollar amounts. Look at the actual usage. Most utilities will show you a chart that goes back 12 or 24 months. If you're seeing patterns that don't match your life, that's information. I should have been looking at that water bill every month. I wasn't because I had it on autopay and I never even opened the email. Fourth, get to know your neighbors. Even a little, even just one of them. Ramona, the woman who flagged the white pickup to Delphine, she saved my whole situation. If she hadn't said anything, Mick would still be in my garage right now. Tell your neighbors your schedule in general terms. Tell them that nobody should be at your house when you're not there. Give them a number. Most people genuinely want to look out for each other, and they just need permission to do it. Fifth, Google your own address. Twice a year, minimum. See what comes up. See if your address is listed on any short-term rental sites, any business registrations, any state filings. You can search business entities for free on every Secretary of State website in the country. Type your address in. See what comes back. I never thought to do this until Detective Lassiter suggested it. When I did it for the first time, 6 LLCs popped up with my address as the registered office, none of which I had ever heard of. That's not normal. That's a flashing red light. Sixth, if something feels off, do something about it that same day. Don't wait until next weekend. Don't tell yourself you're being paranoid. The cost of being paranoid and wrong is a couple of awkward conversations. The cost of being right and slow is the situation I was in. And I guess the last thing I want to say is this. The financial fraud, the lost time, the court dates, the legal fees, all of that was bad. But the part that I keep coming back to, the part that I think will be with me for a long time, is the part you can't really put a number on. They didn't just steal money from the government using my address. They took the version of my house that lived in my head. The empty, quiet one. The one I pictured when I was 300 miles away in some Hilton Garden Inn outside Tallahassee, eating room service and watching the late news. I'd be lying in that hotel bed picturing my own bed, my own living room, my own kitchen, sitting there waiting for me. And the whole time, somebody else was in that picture. Somebody else was at my kitchen island. Somebody else was opening my fridge. Somebody else was leaving hairs in my sink. You can sell a house. You can buy a new lock. You can install all the cameras in the world. But you can't quite get back the feeling that the place where you sleep belongs only to you. When somebody takes that, you don't really get it back. You just learn to live without it. You build something else in its place. Something with more locks on it. I still drive my route. I still hit my numbers. I'm still on the road 4 days a week. The condo is fine. My daughter calls me on Sundays. My brother's offered to retire me up to North Carolina a few years early, and I'm starting to take him seriously about it. But every now and then, when I'm pulling into the parking garage at my condo late on a Thursday night after a long week, I sit in the Tahoe for a minute before I get out. I check my phone. I look at the camera feeds. I make sure the door log shows the last entry was me, and only then do I go upstairs. If you have a life like mine, Please don't wait until you get a phone call from a Delphine to start paying attention. Pay attention now. Look at your bills. Walk your house. Trust the small wrong things when you notice them. The dish that's 6 inches off. The coffee filter that isn't yours. The smell of an aftershave you don't wear. Your house is supposed to be the one place in the world where nothing happens without your say-so. Fight for that, because there are people out there, plenty of them, who are counting on you not to. I've thought a lot about how this whole thing actually happened, and the more I turn it over, the more I see that none of it was random. Mick didn't pick my house out of a hat. He picked it because of choices I'd made. Small ones, none of which felt like much at the time. I gave him a spare key on a sunny Saturday 3 years before any of this started, because he asked nicely and seemed like a good guy, and I was in a hurry to get to a Buccaneers game. I had my water bill on autopay because I told myself I was too busy to look at it. I never bothered to introduce myself to Ramona next door because I told myself I valued my privacy. Every one of those small choices was a brick in the wall that Mick eventually walked right through. That's the part nobody tells you about consequences. They don't show up the day you make the bad call. They show up years later with a pickup truck and a box of envelopes, and by then you can't remember what the original decision even was. What I keep coming back to when I'm lying in my condo late at night is that the version of me that handed Mick that key wasn't a bad guy. He was just a tired guy who wanted to outsource thinking. That's the trap. Not malice on my part, not stupidity, just convenience. I wanted somebody else to worry about my pool, so I didn't have to. I wanted somebody else to watch my house, so I didn't have to. And the world will absolutely send you people who are happy to take on that worry, and a small percentage of those people will be Mick. I think the real work of being a grown man is not letting anyone ever do your noticing for you. Your bills, your locks, your neighbors, your house. The day you stop paying attention to the small things in your own life is the day somebody else starts paying attention to them on your behalf, and they will not have your interests at heart. Delphine paid attention to a water bill that wasn't even hers. Ramona paid attention to a pickup that wasn't even on her property. They did for me what I should have been doing for myself. I owe them a debt I can't really repay, except by becoming the kind of man who pays attention to his own life from now on. I also want to say this. I felt humiliated for a long time after this happened, like I was the gullible idiot in the story. I'm done feeling that way. Trusting a guy in a polo shirt to take care of your pool isn't a character flaw. It's how a society is supposed to work. The shame belongs to Mick, not to me. What belongs to me is the responsibility to be sharper going forward. Not bitter, not closed off, just sharper. That's the difference between getting wiser from a thing and getting smaller from it. I'm trying to do the first one,